Most people fear the silence after a slap, but in Briar Glen, the noise is the weapon. I walked into my mother-in-law's house carrying 2 apple pies and a stomach full of dread. Determined to survive Thanksgiving for my 8-year-old son's sake, I did not know that by dessert, I would be accused of a monster's violence. I also did not know that 6 quiet words and 1 hidden camera were about to burn her perfect reputation to the ground. The tires of our station wagon crunched over the pristine white gravel of the driveway, a sound that always reminded me of bones snapping under pressure. Briar Glen was not just a town, it was an argument for perfection, a place where the lawns were manicured with nail scissors and the secrets were buried under layers of expensive mulch. I looked out the window at the rolling expanse of my in-laws' estate, feeling the familiar tightening in my chest, a physical reaction to the psychological warfare I knew was waiting behind the double oak doors. David was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles had turned the color of old parchment. He did not look at me. He was practicing his silence, a survival mechanism he had perfected over 34 years of being Eleanor Morgan's son. In the back seat, our 8-year-old son, Leo, was humming a song he had learned in school, completely oblivious to the fact that we were entering a combat zone. "Are we there yet?" Leo asked. Pausing his humming, "I want to see if Grandma made the pumpkin roll." "Almost. Buddy," I said, turning in my seat to look at him. He looked so much like David. With the same dark, messy hair and eyes that wanted to trust the world, I reached back and squeezed his knee. "Listen to me for a second." "Okay?" "Okay," he said, his eyes bright. "It is going to be busy inside. Lots of people, lots of noise. I want us to have a secret code today. Just for us." Leo loved secrets. "A code? Like spies?" "Exactly like spies. If things get too loud, or if you feel like you need a break, you just come find me and squeeze my hand 3 times. 1, 2, 3. That means we go outside for fresh air. Deal?" "Deal," Leo said, puffing out his chest. "And Leo?" I added, keeping my voice light but firm. "Stay close to me or Dad. Even if Grandma calls you, make sure you can still see me. The house is big, and we do not want you getting lost." I saw David flinch in the driver's seat. He hated when I managed the environment, but he hated confronting his mother more, so he let me do the heavy lifting of protecting our son. We parked between a silver sedan and a dark SUV that looked like it cost more than our first apartment. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the 2 apple pies resting on my lap. They were warm, heavy, and homemade, a peace offering I knew would be criticized for being too sweet, too tart, or simply not the way David's grandmother used to make them. "Let's get this over with," David whispered. Killing the engine. I promised myself, right then and there, that I would not take the bait. I would be Teflon. I would be water off a duck's back. I would let Eleanor's passive-aggressive darts fly right through me and hit the wall. I was doing this for Leo, who deserved to know his cousins, and for David, who still held on to a fragile, desperate hope that one day his family would just be normal. We walked up the stone path, David carrying the heavy cooler of drinks, me balancing the pies, and Leo skipping ahead with the boundless energy of a child who has not yet learned to fear Thanksgiving. The front door swung open before we even knocked. There they are. Eleanor stood in the doorway, framed by the warm, golden light of the foyer. She was a beautiful woman in a terrifying way, 60 years old but looking 45, with hair so perfectly coiffed it looked like a helmet of spun gold. She wore a cashmere sweater the color of heavy cream and dark trousers that somehow never wrinkled. Her smile was wide, showcasing teeth that had cost a fortune. But it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were calculating, scanning us like a barcode reader, checking for flaws. "Happy Thanksgiving," she cried out, stepping forward to embrace David, ignoring the cooler in his hands and effectively pinning his arms to his sides. She kissed his cheek, leaving a faint smudge of pink lipstick. "Oh, look at you. You look tired. David, are you sleeping? You look thin." "I'm fine." "Mom," David said, his voice dropping an octave. Eleanor turned her beam onto Leo. And there is my little man. Goodness, look at those shoes. Are those for running or for dinner? They are comfortable, I said, stepping up. Hi, Eleanor. Happy Thanksgiving. She looked at me then, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The smile stayed fixed, but the warmth evaporated. Lila, you made it. And you brought pies. Apple, I said. David's favorite. How nice, she said, not taking them. You can just take them around to the back kitchen entrance. The caterers are setting up the main dining spread, and I do not want anything cluttering the counters. I felt the first prick of irritation, but I swallowed it. Of course, I said, as I moved past her. She leaned in, ostensibly to air-kiss my cheek, but her lips hovered an inch from my ear. Her voice dropped to a whisper only I could hear. Try to keep him calm today. Lila, I have invited the Reverend and his wife. We do not want a repeat of the birthday party. She pulled back before I could respond, beaming at the rest of the arriving guests. The birthday party she was referencing was 2 years ago, when Leo had laughed too loud at a clown and she had called it hysteria. She was already rewriting history, painting my normal, happy son as a problem that needed managing. I walked to the kitchen, my heels clicking on the marble floors. The house was breathtaking. I had to admit that high ceilings, crown molding thick enough to stand on, and art that looked like it belonged in a museum. But it felt sterile. It felt like a showroom where life was not lived but performed. The furniture was arranged in conversation clusters that looked uncomfortable, and I noticed there were no personal photos on the walls, only portraits of ancestors and generic landscapes. In the kitchen, 3 women in black uniforms were moving with military precision. I set my pies on a side table, feeling foolish and rustic in this high-end production. Lila. I turned to see Aunt June, David's aunt, bustling in with a glass of white wine in her hand. June was the family broadcaster. Anything you told her was public knowledge within the hour. She looked flushed and anxious. Hi, June, I said. Good to see you. Oh, honey, I am so glad you guys came, she said, lowering her voice and looking over her shoulder. We were not sure if Eleanor was going to be up for hosting this year. You know, after the scare. I frowned. The scare? June's eyes went wide. You did not know? Oh, poor dear. She had a heart flutter last month. The doctors said it was stress, pure stress. We have all been trying to keep things so calm for her. She is being so brave, putting all this on, but we have to be careful. One shock could just, well, you know. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. David had not mentioned a heart scare. Eleanor had not mentioned it. But now, the context of the day had shifted. Eleanor had successfully cast herself as the fragile victim before the turkey was even carved. Any conflict, any disagreement, any loud noise would now be seen not just as rude, but as life-threatening to the matriarch. It was a masterstroke of emotional blackmail. I walked back out to the living room, searching for David and Leo. The house was filling up. There were maybe 30 people, cousins, second cousins, neighbors who were close enough to be family, and the aforementioned Reverend. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasting meat. I found David in the corner, holding a beer, listening to his uncle drone on about interest rates. David looked trapped. I scanned the room for Leo and found him sitting on a stiff velvet ottoman, looking at a comic book he had snuck in. I walked over to him. Hey, bud. Doing okay? Yeah, he said, not looking up. Grandma took my iPad. She said screens are rude. I stiffened. She did? She put it in a drawer. She said I need to learn to converse. He is 8. I thought, he does not converse about interest rates. I took a breath. Okay, well, the comic is cool. Just keep it low profile, all right? Lila. Darling! Eleanor's voice cut through the room. She was standing by the fireplace, one hand resting dramatically on the mantel. She waved me over. The room quieted slightly. In Briar Glen, when Eleanor summoned you, people watched. I walked over, feeling eyes on my back. Yes? I was just telling Sarah here about your job. Eleanor said, gesturing to a woman I barely recognized. "Sarah, this is Lila. She works in, what is it again? Publishing? I am a copy editor." I said, "Right," Eleanor said, smiling a smile that suggested I collected garbage for a living. "She corrects people's grammar. Can you imagine the attention to detail? It must be exhausting to be so critical all the time. I do not know how you turn it off when you come home to David and the boy." I felt the heat rise in my neck. Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice even, "it is about clarity, making sure the story makes sense." Eleanor laughed. A tinkling, brittle sound. "Well, we certainly need clarity. Speaking of which, could you be a dear and help move these chairs? I want the flow to be better for the appetizers." She began directing me, and then David, and then 2 cousins, treating us like stagehands. "Move this chair 3 inches left. No, that blocks the view of the garden. Turn that lamp." It was not about the furniture. It was about dominance. She was showing everyone that she could move us at will. I watched her reposition David, physically taking him by the shoulders and steering him to a different spot. He went limp, allowing it. It broke my heart to see him revert to a prop in her play. "I need to check on the food," Eleanor announced suddenly, pressing a hand to her chest and letting out a small, weary sigh. The room collectively held its breath. "Are you okay, Elle?" Aunt June asked, rushing forward. "I am fine," Eleanor said, brave and suffering. "Just a little palpitations. It is the excitement. I just need a moment." She swept out of the room toward the kitchen. The guests exchanged worried glances. "She is a saint." Someone whispered. I looked around for Leo. He was gone. The velvet ottoman was empty. The comic book was sitting on the cushion. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked my skin. I scanned the room. The front door was closed. The patio doors were closed. He must have gone to find the bathroom. Or maybe he was hungry. I started moving through the crowd. David caught my eye, questioning. I mouthed, "Where is Leo?" He shrugged, scanning the room himself. I walked toward the hallway that led to the kitchen and the dining room. The house was large, echoing. I heard the clatter of silverware from the dining room where the caterers were working, but the kitchen was further back. Down a side corridor, I heard a small voice. "Grandma?" It was Leo. I quickened my pace. I turned the corner into the hallway that fed into the expansive chef's kitchen. The door was ajar. I saw them through the gap. Leo was standing near the massive island, looking at a tray of intricate marzipan fruits. He was not touching them, just looking. His hands clasped behind his back like a little professor. Eleanor was standing on the other side of the island, her back to the main door, facing him. She was not looking at the fruit. She was looking at the hallway entrance, checking to see if anyone was watching. She did not see me in the shadows of the corridor yet. "Go ahead," she said to Leo. Her voice was low, devoid of the syrup she used in public. "You can touch one." "Really?" Leo asked. "Mom said I should wait. Your mom worries too much," Eleanor said. "She wants you to be afraid of everything, but you are a big boy. Go on, grab that apple." I started to move forward, my instinct screaming that this was a trap. Why was she baiting him to break a rule? Leo reached out his hand, tentative. Suddenly, Eleanor's demeanor shifted violently. It was like watching a snake strike. She lunged forward across the island, not toward Leo, but toward the space between them. "No!" she shrieked. It was a performance, a loud, desperate cry designed to carry. "Lila!" She yelled my name, though she had not seen me. "Lila, get him!" I ran. I burst through the door just as Leo recoiled, terrified by her sudden scream. He stumbled back, eyes wide. "Grandma?" he squeaked. Eleanor grabbed a heavy ceramic serving platter from the counter, one of those thick, artisanal pieces she loved. She lifted it slightly and then slammed it down onto the granite countertop with everything she had. Crack! The sound was explosive. It sounded like bone hitting stone, or a hand striking flesh with impossible force. It was sharp, wet, and incredibly loud. Immediately after the sound, Eleanor threw her hand up to her mouth and stumbled back against the refrigerator, gasping. Leo stood frozen. He had not been touched. He was 5 feet away from her. He was staring at her, his mouth open in total confusion. He looked at the platter, then at her, then at me. Behind me, footsteps thundered down the hall. "Oh my God!" someone screamed. It was Sarah, the woman from the living room. She pushed past me into the kitchen. "She hit him." "What?" I said, my brain trying to catch up to the scene. "No, she—" Eleanor slumped against the fridge, her hand trembling as she pointed a shaking finger at me. "Not Leo. Me. I tried to stop him." She sobbed, her voice trembling with manufactured shock. "I tried to stop him and she just lunged." The kitchen filled with people instantly. David was there, his face pale. Aunt June was there. The Reverend was there. "What happened?" David demanded. Looking from his mother to me to Leo, Leo ran to me, burying his face in my stomach. He was not crying, but he was shaking. "Mom? Why is Grandma yelling?" I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the smallness of his ribcage. "She is okay, Leo. She is okay." "She hit him!" Sarah yelled again to the room, turning to the gathering crowd. I heard the slap. It sounded like a gunshot. "No!" I shouted, my voice sounding harsh and shrill in the sudden silence. "No one hit anyone. She hit the counter." Eleanor straightened up, wiping a non-existent tear from her cheek. She looked at me with an expression of profound pity and fear. "Lila, please, stop screaming. You are scaring the boy." "I am scaring him?" I stared at her, incredulous. "You just slammed a platter to make a noise." Eleanor looked at David, her eyes wide and pleading. "David, I told Leo he could not have a sweet yet, and Lila came in so hot. She was so angry. I think she tried to grab him and— oh God, the sound." She shuddered. I looked at David. He was looking at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw doubt. He had heard the crack. Everyone had heard the crack. And now they were looking at the scene. Eleanor, the fragile heart patient, leaning weakly against the fridge, Leo hiding in my shirt, and me, standing there with a face flushed red from adrenaline and rage. "I did not touch him," I said, lowering my voice, trying to channel the calm I had promised myself. "Leo, did I touch you? Did Grandma touch you?" Leo looked up, his eyes darting around the room full of staring adults. He was overwhelmed. I heard a noise, a big noise. "See?" Aunt June hissed. "The poor child is traumatized." "Lila," the Reverend said, stepping forward with his hands raised in a placating gesture, "maybe we should all take a breath. Tensions run high during the holidays." "I am not tense," I snapped, and instantly regretted it. The outburst only cemented the image Eleanor was painting. The volatile, unhinged mother. Eleanor took a step toward Leo. "Come here, darling. Grandma has got you. It is okay. Mommy is just having a moment. Do not come near him," I said. The words came out low and dangerous. The room gasped. I had just drawn a line in the sand. I had just threatened the matriarch in her own kitchen. On Thanksgiving, in front of the church leadership. Eleanor stopped, looking wounded. She turned to the crowd, her voice trembling. "I only wanted to protect him. He was reaching for a knife." "A knife?" I looked at the counter. The marzipan tray was there. Next to it, a small silver spreading knife. It was dull. It was harmless. But in the narrative she was spinning, it was a deadly weapon, and she was the hero who had intercepted a tragedy, only to be assaulted by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. "He was reaching for the candy." I said, "David," Eleanor whispered, "please, I cannot take this yelling. My chest." She pressed her hand to her heart again. David moved instantly. "Lila, stop. Just stop. We need to cool down." He was siding with the patient. He was managing the crisis by neutralizing the loudest element. And right now, that was me. I looked at Eleanor. She was not looking at David. She was looking at me. And for a split second, the mask slipped. There was no fear in her eyes. There was no heart flutter. There was only a cold, hard satisfaction. She had set the stage, directed the actors, and executed the climax perfectly. I realized then that this was not a misunderstanding. This was a hit job. She was not just trying to embarrass me, she was trying to characterize me. She was building a file, unstable, aggressive, danger to the child. I looked down at Leo. He was looking at me, waiting for me to fix it. If I screamed, I lost. If I argued, I lost. If I called her a liar, I looked like a lunatic attacking a sick woman. The story was being written in real time, the ink drying fast on the page. Lila Morgan snapped at Thanksgiving. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I smoothed Leo's hair. "We are going to the guest room," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Leo needs a minute." I did not wait for permission. I did not look at David. I took Leo's hand and walked him out of the kitchen, parting the sea of shocked relatives like the Red Sea. I could feel their eyes on my back, burning with judgment. I could hear the whispers starting before I even cleared the doorway. "Did you hear that slap?" I always knew she was high-strung. Poor Eleanor. I walked up the stairs, my legs shaking, holding onto my son's hand as if it were the only anchor in a world that had suddenly tilted on its axis. I needed to check him. I needed to make sure he really was physically okay. And then, I needed to figure out how to fight a war where my opponent owned the battlefield, the witnesses, and the truth itself. As we reached the top of the stairs, I heard Eleanor's voice drift up from the kitchen, shaky and brave. "Please, everyone, forgive her. She has been under so much pressure lately. Let's just pray for them." The trap had snapped shut, but as I opened the door to the guest room and ushered Leo inside, a cold resolve settled in my chest. Replacing the panic, she wanted a villain? Fine. But she had forgotten one thing about villains. They do not play by the rules, and neither would I. This was not over. It was just the opening scene. The guest room door clicked shut, severing the noise of the house from the sudden, ringing silence of the sanctuary I had created. The air in the room smelled of lavender sachets and dust, a scent that felt ancient and stifling. I locked the door. It was a breach of social etiquette in the Morgan household to lock doors. It implied secrets. And secrets were the currency Eleanor hoarded. Not spent, but I did not care. I knelt on the Persian rug, bringing myself to eye level with Leo. He was still clutching my sleeve, his knuckles white against the dark fabric of my blouse. His eyes were wide, darting around the room as if he expected the walls to reprimand him. "Leo, look at me," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. An anchor in the storm. He focused on my face. His breathing was shallow, little hitches in his chest that threatened to turn into sobs. But he was holding them back. He had learned, even at 8 years old, that crying in this house was blood in the water. "I need you to take a deep breath with me, in through your nose, out through your mouth, just like we practice for swimming." We breathed together. 1, 2, 3. I watched his shoulders drop an inch. "I am going to check your arms, okay? I just want to make sure you didn't bump into anything when you jumped back." I rolled up the sleeves of his plaid shirt with slow, deliberate movements. His skin was unblemished. No red marks, no bruises, no scratches. I checked his hands, his face, his neck. He was physically perfect. The violence had been auditory, psychological, but it had not touched his body. Thank God. "I am okay." "Mom," Leo whispered, "I did not do it." "I know you didn't," I said firmly, taking his small hands in mine. "I know you didn't do anything wrong. I want you to tell me exactly what happened, just the facts, like a reporter. What did you see?" He bit his lip, thinking, "Grandma said I could have the apple, the marzipan apple. She said you were too worried, and then I reached for it. I did not touch it yet. And then she screamed, 'No,' really loud. It scared me. And then there was a big bang noise, like a firecracker." "Did you see what made the noise?" I asked, keeping my face neutral. Suppressing the rage that wanted to boil over, Leo shook his head. "I was looking at her face. She looked scary." And then she hit the counter with the big plate. She hit the counter, I repeated, locking the detail away in my mind. She hit the counter with the plate. Yeah. And then everyone ran in and she started crying. Why did she say I hurt her? The question hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. How do you explain to a child that his grandmother is a narcissist who uses people like chess pieces? You protect him from the complexity until he is old enough to understand the cruelty. Grandma was confused. I lied. It was a misunderstanding. But I know the truth, and you know the truth, and Dad knows the truth. That is what matters. I pulled him into a hug, burying my nose in his hair. He smelled like shampoo and innocent sweat. I felt a fierce, primal protective instinct surge through me. I would burn this house down brick by brick before I let them pin a label of violence on this boy. We stayed there for 10 minutes. I texted David. We are fine. Give us 5 minutes. Do not come up. I needed the time to compose my face. I needed to put on armor. If I went downstairs looking rattled, I confirmed their narrative. If I went downstairs looking angry, I confirmed their narrative. I had to go downstairs looking bored. I had to look like a mother dealing with a minor tantrum from an elderly relative. Not a crisis. Ready to go back? I asked Leo. You can bring your comic book. Stick to me like glue. I am ready, he said, though he looked small. We walked down the stairs. The house had changed. The atmosphere had shifted from festive anticipation to a morbid, vibrating tension. It felt like a wake where everyone secretly hated the deceased, but was performing grief for the cameras. As we reached the landing, the voices drifted up from the dining room. They were hushed, a collective murmur of scandal. I never thought she was capable of that. A woman's voice said, it sounded like Sarah. Well, you know, these things start at home, a man replied. If there is no discipline, shh, she is coming. The silence that fell as I stepped into the foyer was absolute. 30 heads turned. It was a physical weight. That collective gaze. They were looking for the monster. They were looking for the hysterical woman who attacked the matriarch. I walked past them with my head high, guiding Leo to the living room where the younger cousins were playing Mario Kart. Stay here, I told him quietly. Do not leave this room. I turned and walked into the dining room. The table was set. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, a centerpiece of autumn flowers that probably cost more than my car payment. Eleanor was seated at the head of the table, a throne-like chair with high velvet backing. She looked pale, tragic, and beautiful. She was holding a glass of water with a trembling hand. Surrounded by a court of sympathizers, Aunt June, the Reverend, and a few neighbors who had arrived just in time for the show. David was standing by the window, looking out at the dark lawn. He looked defeated. I walked to my seat. I sat down. I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap. Lila, the Reverend said, his voice deep and sorrowful. We were just praying for peace. That is lovely, I said. My voice was steady, clear, and utterly devoid of apology. Eleanor set her glass down. The tremble in her hand was a masterpiece of acting. She looked at me with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. Lila, she said softly. Her voice carried across the silent room. I want to apologize. The room leaned in. This was the moment. The gracious victim offering absolution to the aggressor. I know how hard you work, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining a little strength, brave and forgiving, and I know the holidays are stressful. We all get emotional on holidays. I should not have offered him the sweet if I knew it would trigger such a reaction. I am sorry if I overstepped your boundaries. It was perfect. It was lethal. In 3 sentences, she had labeled me as overworked, stressed, emotional, and rigid, while painting herself as generous and apologetic. She had taken responsibility for offering a candy, implying I had taken responsibility for violence. If I accepted the apology, I accepted the premise. If I rejected it, I was a monster who refused a grandmother's peace offering. I looked at her. I held her gaze. I did not blink. Thank you, Eleanor, I said. We certainly want to make sure everyone feels safe. It was a non-answer. It hung there, refusing to validate her script. Eleanor's eyes narrowed by a fraction of a millimeter. "Why don't we eat?" Aunt June said, desperate to break the tension. "The turkey is getting cold." As people began to shuffle toward the buffet, the noise level rising to a polite, nervous hum, Eleanor stood up. She moved toward me, ostensibly to head to the kitchen, but she paused at my chair. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "To the room." It was a gesture of reconciliation, a mother-in-law comforting a daughter-in-law. She leaned down. Her perfume was overpowering. Gardenias and old money. "People will believe what they saw." "Lila," she whispered. Her voice was like ice, not what you say, what they saw. She squeezed my shoulder, hard, her nails digging into the fabric of my dress, and then breezed past me toward the kitchen. I sat frozen. "People will believe what they saw." She was telling me the rules of the game. Truth was irrelevant. Perception was reality, and she owned the perception. She had staged a visual tableau, the recoil, the scream, the noise, and she knew that human brains were wired to trust their eyes and ears over complex explanations. I felt a hand on my arm. It was David. He had finally moved from the window. "Lila," he whispered, sliding into the chair next to me. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Did you hear what she just said to me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. David rubbed his face with his hands. "Lila, please, not now. She just threatened me." "David, she said people will believe what they saw. She is admitting it was a setup." David looked around the room, terrified that someone would hear us. "Lila, she is upset. She is embarrassed. Everyone is watching us. Can we just let it go for tonight? Let it go?" I stared at him. "David, she accused me of hitting our son. She accused me of hitting her. This is not a burnt casserole. This is slander." I know, David hissed, "but fighting her tonight, here, in front of the Reverend and the neighbors, it is suicide. You know how she is. If you push her, she escalates. If we just stay quiet, she will calm down. She will forget about it by Christmas. She will not forget." I said, "She is building a case. David, she is calling me unstable." "You are acting a little intense," David said, and then flinched as if he expected me to hit him. I looked at my husband. I saw the boy he used to be, the boy who had learned to survive by making himself small, by agreeing with the tyrant to avoid the dungeon. He was not trying to hurt me. He was trying to save us the only way he knew how, by capitulating. He had been trained to minimize harm by calling it peace, but it wasn't peace. It was submission. "I am not intense," I said coldly. "I am cornered. Just get through dinner," David begged. "Please, for Leo. We will leave right after dessert. I promise." I looked at the buffet line. People were piling turkey onto their plates, casting furtive glances at our table. I saw the whispers moving like smoke signals, unstable. "Did you see her eyes?" "Poor David." "Fine," I said. "For Leo." I stood up and joined the line. I felt like a ghost walking through a party I had died at. As I reached for the cranberry sauce, a soft voice spoke beside me. "She has been saving them." I turned. It was Bethany, David's younger sister. She was the black sheep of the family, mostly because she had moved to the city and married an artist, refusing to play the Briar Glen social game, but she still came back, pulled by the same gravity that held David. "What?" I asked. Bethany didn't look at me. She was intently focused on spooning stuffing onto her plate. "Screenshots," she murmured. "Emails. Comments you made on Facebook years ago. She has a folder on her iPad. She calls it the Lila file." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. "Why?" Bethany shrugged, finally glancing at me with sad, tired eyes. "Because she needs leverage. She always needs leverage. She has been collecting stories about you for months. Little things. Times you raised your voice. Times you had a glass of wine. Anything that can paint you as volatile." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because today wasn't an accident," Bethany said. She picked up a roll. "Watch your back. Lila. And watch the phones." She moved away before I could ask more. Watch the phones. I took my plate back to the table. I picked at my food. The turkey tasted like sawdust. The gravy tasted like grease. I scanned the room, really looking this time. The table was long, seating 20 people, and then I saw it. Cousin Mike had his phone propped up against his water glass. The camera lens was facing me. He wasn't looking at it. He was eating, but the phone was recording. I looked across the table. Sarah had her phone flat on the table, but her thumb was hovering over the screen, and the device was angled toward me. They were waiting. They were waiting for the unstable daughter-in-law to snap. They were waiting for me to throw a drink, or raise my voice, or cry. They wanted the B-roll footage for the documentary Eleanor was directing in her head, The Downfall of Lila Morgan. If I confronted Mike, I would look paranoid. "Why are you filming me?" he would say. "I'm just taking a time-lapse of the dinner." And I would look crazy. If I stayed silent, they would keep recording, waiting for a slip-up. I put my fork down. I needed to get out of the line of fire. I needed to find the source. I need some water. I said to David. I stood up. I walked out of the dining room, feeling the lenses tracking me. I did not go to the beverage station. I turned left, down the hallway, back toward the scene of the crime. The kitchen was empty now. The caterers were in the dining room, clearing appetizer plates. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, vibrating with the echo of the earlier crash. I walked to the island. The marzipan tray was still there, untouched. The silver knife was still there. I looked at the spot where Eleanor had stood. I looked at the fridge she had slumped against. And then I looked at the counter behind the island. It was a clutter of high-end kitchen gadgets, a heavy mixer, a marble rolling pin, a stack of cookbooks. Tucked between a stack of Bon Appetit magazines and a jar of artisan pasta was a small black tripod. It was a flexible one, the kind you wrap around things. It was gripping the handle of a heavy ceramic pitcher. Attached to the tripod was a smartphone, not Eleanor's main phone. I knew her case. This was an older model, maybe an iPhone from 2 generations ago. The screen was dark. I reached out and tapped it. It lit up. It was in camera mode, video. I looked at the angle. The lens was pointed perfectly through the gap between the mixer and the magazines. It was pointed directly at the spot where Leo had stood. It captured the hallway entrance. It captured the island. It was not a recipe setup. There was no food being prepared there. It was a surveillance post. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked around to make sure I was alone. I pressed the gallery icon in the corner of the screen. There were 3 videos, all from today. I hesitated. I knew I should watch them. I knew this was the smoking gun. But footsteps echoed in the hallway. Lila? It was David. He was coming to find me. I quickly tapped the phone screen off and took a step back, pretending to pour water from the tap. David appeared in the doorway. "You have been gone a while. Mom is asking if you are okay." "I am fine," I said, turning off the tap. "Just needed a breather." "Come back," he said gently. "Dessert is coming out." I walked back with him, my mind racing. I couldn't take the phone. If I took it, she would know I knew. She would claim I stole it. She would delete the cloud backup. I needed to be smarter. I needed to secure the footage without tipping her off. We sat back down. The mood had shifted again. Coffee was being poured. The tension had softened into a drowsy, post-turkey stupor for most of the guests, but Eleanor was still sharp, still watching. Leo came back from the living room, looking tired. He climbed onto the chair next to me. "Can we go home soon?" he whispered. "Soon, baby," I promised. He leaned his head on my shoulder. "Mom? Yeah?" I remembered something else, he said. His voice was barely a breath. "What is it?" "Earlier, before you guys got here, I was playing hide-and-seek by myself. I was in the laundry room next to the kitchen. Okay, I heard Grandma talking. She was in the kitchen. She was talking to the phone, but on speaker. Who was she talking to? I don't know. A lady. But Grandma was looking in the mirror. There is a mirror by the back door. She was making faces. Making faces? Yeah. She was making a sad face, like she was crying. But she wasn't crying. She would do the face, and then stop, and then do it again, and she said to the phone, "Stay ready. Don't miss the moment. I will make sure the angle is clear." My blood ran cold. Stay ready. Don't miss the moment. And the lady on the phone laughed. Leo continued. She said, "I have the storage space. Just give me the show." Leo yawned, rubbing his eyes. "Is that weird? Practicing faces?" "It is very weird." "Leo," I said, kissing the top of his head, "you are a very good observer." I looked down the table at Eleanor. She was laughing at something the Reverend said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She looked radiant, victorious. The pieces clicked together in my mind with the precision of a trap snapping shut. The recipe camera in the kitchen, the practice in the mirror, the "stay ready" command, and the sound. I replayed the moment in my head, the crack. I looked at the table in front of me. There was a heavy ceramic coaster under my water glass. I lifted the glass. I picked up the coaster. It was thick, heavy stone. If I slammed this against a granite countertop, what would it sound like? Crack. She hadn't slapped Leo. She hadn't even slapped herself. She had slammed an object, maybe the platter, maybe a coaster, maybe a wooden cutting board, against the counter to mimic the auditory signature of violence. She relied on the fact that the kitchen island blocked the lower half of her body from the hallway view. She relied on the human instinct to turn toward a noise. By the time eyes were on her, the noise was gone, and she was already in the recoil pose. It was brilliant. It was theatrical. It was evil. And everyone in this room believed it. I looked at the phones propped up on the table. They were the secondary cameras. The kitchen phone was the primary feed, likely recording the incident to be leaked later as leaked security footage or accidental home video. If I stood up now and screamed, "She faked it," I would look insane. I had no physical proof on me. The phone was in the kitchen. The witness was an 8-year-old boy whose testimony would be dismissed as coached. I needed the video, but more than that, I needed to know who was on the other end of the line. I have the storage space. There was an accomplice, someone outside the house, someone who was storing the data. I looked at Eleanor again. She caught my eye. She raised her coffee cup in a subtle, mocking toast. Her eyes said, "Checkmate." She thought she had won. She thought she had cowed me into submission. She thought I would scurry away, divorced from my dignity, terrified of her power, willing to sign whatever custody agreements or ND. As she shoved in front of David to keep the shameful family secret quiet. She didn't know I was a copy editor. She didn't know that my entire career was built on finding the inconsistencies in a narrative, finding the typo that ruins the document, finding the plot hole that unravels the story. She had left a typo. She had left the camera. She had let Leo hear her. She had been too arrogant, too confident in her direction. I took a sip of water. I forced myself to smile. It was a small, tight smile, but it was there. I am ready for dessert. I said to David. He looked at me, surprised by my sudden composure. "Really? Really? The pumpkin roll looks delicious." I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to stay. I was going to let them film me eating cake. I was going to be the picture of calm, rational stability. I would give them absolutely zero footage for their unstable reel. And while I ate, I was going to formulate a plan to get that phone, identifying the accomplice, and turn their own surveillance state against them. I reached under the table and squeezed Leo's hand 3 times. 1, 2, 3. He looked at me. That was the code for "we go outside," but I shook my head slightly. I squeezed his hand again, a long, steady pressure. "I am here. We are safe." He squeezed back. I picked up my fork. Let the performance begin. "Eleanor," I thought, "but you should know. The third act is always where the plot twists." I took a bite of the pumpkin roll. It was dry. We left an hour later. The goodbyes were stiff. Eleanor did not hug me. She stood in the doorway, the grieving grandmother, waving to Leo. "I love you." "Leo," she called out. "Grandma will see you soon." We got in the car. David exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for 4 hours. "Thank God that is over," he said. I looked out the window as we drove away. The house glowed on the hill. A fortress of lies. It is not over. David, I said quietly, so only the glass could hear me. I pulled out my phone. I opened the Notes app. I started a new file. Timeline of events. Thanksgiving. 1. The warning. Aunt June. 2. The setup. Kitchen. 3. The accomplice. Speakerphone. 4. The evidence. Camera on tripod. I typed furiously as the white gravel gave way to asphalt. I was not just a mother anymore. I was a prosecutor building a case, and I would not rest until I had buried her under the weight of her own fiction. David turned on the radio. It was a Christmas song. It's the most wonderful time of the year. I reached over and turned it off. Silence is better, I said. David didn't argue. He just drove, putting miles between us and Briar Glen, unaware that his wife was currently declaring war on his mother in the glowing light of a smartphone screen. I glanced back at Leo. He was asleep, his head lolling against the seatbelt. I will fix this, I whispered. I closed my eyes, visualizing the kitchen counter. I needed that video, and I knew exactly how I was going to get it. I wouldn't steal it. That was too risky. I was going to make her send it to me. But that was a problem for tomorrow. For tonight, we had escaped the stage. The curtain was down. But the critics were writing their reviews, and I had to be ready for the morning edition. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at 6:30 in the morning, vibrating against the wood like a trapped insect. I had slept in fits and starts, my dreams haunted by the sound of ceramic cracking against stone and the image of Eleanor's triumphant, pitying eyes. I reached for the phone, squinting against the blue light, expecting perhaps a text from David, who had gone downstairs early to make coffee. It was not David. It was a text from a number I did not have saved, but the area code was familiar. It was a Briar Glen number. I heard what happened. I am praying for you and the little one. If you need a recommendation for a specialist, my sister knows a wonderful therapist in the city. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. A specialist? Then another text came through. This one was from David's cousin Sarah, the one who had screamed in the kitchen. Lila, I hope you are getting rest. Please do not come to the Christmas Eve gathering. Aunt Eleanor is terrified of another outburst. And frankly, so am I. Get well soon. And another from Aunt June. We love you. Honey, we know it is not your fault. Mental health is a journey. Just focus on getting better for Leo. I sat up, the duvet falling away from my chest. The air in our bedroom was cold, but my skin burned. In the 8 hours since we had left Briar Glen, the narrative had not only solidified, it had traveled, mutated, and infected the entire extended family. They were not angry. That would have been easier to fight. They were concerned. They were treating me like an invalid, a woman who had suffered a psychotic break. The rumor had outrun the truth before I had even poured my morning coffee. I got out of bed, my legs feeling heavy. I walked downstairs. David was sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. He did not look up when I entered. Did you see the texts? I asked. My voice sounded scrappier than usual. David nodded slowly. Mom called me. When? Dawn? 5:30? And? He looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. He looked like a man who had been interrogated for days. She thinks we need to take a break. Lila. A break? I repeated, gripping the back of a chair. What does that mean? David? A divorce? No, he said quickly, panic flaring in his eyes. No, she means a break from her, a break from the family. She said she cannot have you around the house until you get help. Get help, I echoed. The phrase hung in the kitchen. Sterile and damning. She is worried. Lila, David said, his voice dropping to a whisper. She said you looked dissociative. She said you had a glassy look right before you lunged at Leo. I did not lunge at Leo. David! I slammed my hand on the table. David flinched. He actually pulled back, his shoulders hunching. See? He whispered. You are shouting." I froze. I saw what was happening. The seed had been planted so deep in his mind that now, every normal reaction I had, every flash of anger, every raised voice, was being filtered through the lens of his mother's lie. My frustration was no longer frustration. It was a symptom. My defense was no longer truth. It was instability. I am shouting because I am being gaslit. "David," I said, lowering my voice to a terrifying calm, "I am shouting because your mother is dismantling my reality, and you are handing her the wrench. I just want peace." "Lila," he said, his voice cracking, "I just want everyone to be safe." I turned away from him. I could not look at him. He was not my partner right now. He was a hostage. "I need coffee," I said, "and not from this house." I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. I needed to be in the world. I needed to see reality, to see people who did not think I was a monster. I drove to a coffee shop about 10 minutes from our house. We lived in a suburb that bordered Briar Glen, close enough to visit, far enough to breathe, or so I had thought. The shop, the daily grind, was busy with the Sunday morning crowd. Young couples with strollers, students with laptops, older men reading papers. I ordered a black coffee and stood by the pickup counter. Trying to regulate my breathing, 2 women were standing near the sugar station, their backs to me. They were dressed in the Sunday uniform of the area, quilted jackets and riding boots. "It is just so sad," one of them said. "She has always seemed so put together." "Well, that is how it manifests," the other replied. "High functioning until the pressure cracks." Eleanor said the child was absolutely terrified. She said he was cowering under the table while she screamed. I felt the blood drain from my face. Cowering under the table? The story had already evolved. In reality, Leo had been standing next to me. Now, in the retelling, he was hiding under furniture. "I cannot imagine," the first woman said, shaking her head, "to hit a child. On Thanksgiving, Eleanor is a saint for not calling the police right then and there." I stood frozen. My hand hovered over the lid of my coffee cup. These were not family members. These were strangers. This was the community. Eleanor's influence was not limited to bloodlines. It was atmospheric. She was the matriarch of the church committee, the chair of the library board, the donor for the park. When she spoke, Briar Glen listened, and Briar Glen believed. I grabbed my coffee, burning my fingers, and walked out. I felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter. I felt like every person looking at me saw the monster Eleanor had drawn. I sat in my car in the parking lot, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I could not go back to Briar Glen. I could not defend myself. How do you prove a negative? I did not hit my son. It is the kind of denial that makes you look guilty just by saying it. I drove home. I had to see Leo. When I walked in, Leo was in the living room, building a complex structure out of magnetic tiles. He was humming the same song from yesterday. He looked completely, beautifully normal. "Hi, Mom," he said, not looking up. "Hi, buddy," I said, sitting on the floor next to him. He placed a red tile on top of a blue one. "Mom? Yeah?" Why did Grandma want me to think I was hurt? The question was a spear through my chest. It was so simple, so piercing. He hadn't asked, why did she yell? He had asked why she wanted him to participate in his own victimization. I took a deep breath. "Why do you ask that?" "Because," he said, frowning at his tower. When she hugged me, after the big noise, she squeezed me really hard, and she whispered, "Cry, Leo. It is okay to cry." But I didn't want to cry. I wasn't sad. I was just surprised. He looked at me, his eyes wide and confused. Why did she want me to cry? "Mom?" I reached out and touched his cheek. "Because, Leo, sometimes people want a story to be true so badly. They try to make other people act it out. But you were brave. You didn't act it out. You stayed you. I am not scared of you," he said matter-of-factly. "You make good pancakes." I pulled him into a hug, hiding my face in his shoulders so he wouldn't see the tears that suddenly sprang to my eyes. "You make good pancakes." It was the highest character witness testimony I could ever ask for. But his question lingered. Why? Why go to such lengths? Why stage a slap? Why traumatize a child? It was too big for just a petty grievance. Eleanor didn't like me. Sure, she thought I was too independent, too career-focused, not deferential enough, but this was nuclear warfare. This was an attempt to destroy me completely. I stood up. I went into the home office and closed the door. I needed a lawyer. I searched for family law attorneys in a neighboring county. Someone outside Eleanor's sphere of influence. I found a woman named Sarah Jenkins with 5-star reviews and a website that said aggressive representation for high-conflict divorces. I called the emergency number listed. It was Sunday, but she picked up. Jenkins Law. This is Sarah. Hi, I said, my voice trembling slightly. My name is Lila Morgan. I need a consultation. Immediately, I told her everything. I kept it factual. The visit, the setup, the noise, the accusation, the texts I woke up to, the rumors in the coffee shop. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Okay, Sarah said. Her voice was crisp, professional, and devoid of the pity I had been hearing all morning. Here is the situation. Lila, you are in the danger zone. What does that mean? It means that in the court of family law, perception can become law very quickly. If she files a report with Child Protective Services, or if she convinces your husband to file for emergency custody based on imminent danger, you could lose access to your son pending an investigation. My stomach dropped. Can she do that? Without proof? Allegations of physical abuse are taken very seriously, Sarah said. And if she has witnesses, which it sounds like she has lined up, and if she has the community backing her, yes, she can make your life a living hell for 6 months to a year while the courts sort it out, and by then, the damage to your son is done. What do I do? I asked. Documentation is God. Sarah said, you document everything. Write down every word that was said. Save every text. Screenshot every social media post. And do not, under any circumstances, leave that house. Do not let them separate you from the child. If you leave, they can claim abandonment or instability. You stay put. You are the primary caregiver. You maintain the status quo. And do not fight her publicly, she added. Do not post on Facebook defending yourself. Do not argue in the group chat. You go silent. You let them talk. You gather evidence. I hung up feeling a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a family squabble. It was a legal siege. I sat at my computer. I opened a new document. I started transcribing the texts. Time, 6:30. A.M. Sender, Aunt June. Content. Implication of mental instability. I worked for 2 hours. I categorized the rumors. I wrote down the names of the people in the room. Then, I turned to the internet. Eleanor was not a digital native, but she was savvy. She had a Facebook account where she posted photos of her garden and her charity work. I went to her page. It was locked down. Private, but I knew her patterns. Eleanor loved praise. She loved an audience, and she had a wholesome alias she used for her church forums. Graceful Gardener. I searched for it. I found a private Facebook group called The Prayer Closet. Briar Glen. It had 300 members. It was listed as a support group for women of faith navigating family trials. I couldn't join, but I knew someone who could. My college roommate, Elena, lived 3 states away. She had a generic profile she used for couponing. I texted her, need a favor. Can you request to join this group? Need to see if they are talking about me. Elena was loyal. 10 minutes later. She sent me a screenshot. I'm in. They let anyone in who has a Bible verse in their bio. Send me the recent posts. I typed. The images started coming through. Posted 4 hours ago by Graceful Gardener. Sisters, my heart is heavy today. The enemy is attacking my family. We had a violent incident at Thanksgiving. My son's wife. The darkness has taken hold of her. She hurt my grandson, physically, in my kitchen. Please pray for protection for the little one. We are trying to get him out of that environment, but the law is slow. Pray for David to have the strength to do what is necessary. There were 50 comments. Oh, Eleanor, I am weeping for you. Mental illness is a demon. Keep that boy safe. Has David called a lawyer yet? And then, a comment from Graceful Gardner that made my blood freeze. He is close. We just need to show him that he cannot save her. He has to save the boy. There is a trust fund clause for unfit guardianship that we might have to invoke. It breaks my heart. But we need to cut off the resources to force her into treatment. I stared at the screen. A trust fund clause. This wasn't just about reputation. This was about money. There was a trust. I knew David had a family trust, but he always said it was small, just for education. But unfit guardianship? Cut off resources? She was trying to trigger a clause that would strip David of his inheritance unless he divorced me. Or perhaps she was trying to strip me of any access to family money in a divorce settlement by proving I was abusive. It was a heist of my son and my financial future, disguised as a prayer request. My phone buzzed again. It was a message on WhatsApp. It was from Bethany, David's sister. Lila, do not reply to this. I am using a burner app. I found something. My heart hammered. What? I went back to the house this morning to pick up my coat. Mom was at church. I went into the kitchen. The camera was still there. She moved it. But she didn't delete the SD card. She thinks she is untouchable. A video file appeared in the chat. Watch this, Bethany wrote, and then call the police. I clicked play. The video was vertical, grainy, shot from a low angle on the kitchen counter. It peered through the gap between the mixer and the cookbooks. I saw the timestamp. Yesterday, 3:15 p.m. In the frame, I saw Eleanor. She was alone in the kitchen. She was pacing. She checked her reflection in the microwave door. She practiced a grimace. She smoothed her hair. Then, she looked at her phone, which was on the counter on speaker. Okay, Helen, she said. He's coming in. Helen, that was the church friend who ran the IT for the charity, the accomplice. I saw Leo walk into the frame. My sweet, innocent boy. He looked at the marzipan. Go ahead, Eleanor said, her voice sugary. You can touch one. Leo reached out, and then I saw it. I saw the mechanism of the lie. Eleanor did not look at Leo. She looked directly at the hallway, gauging the distance. She raised her right hand. She wasn't holding a platter. She was holding a heavy marble pestle from the mortar and pestle set. She opened her mouth and screamed. No! Simultaneously, she slammed the marble pestle down onto the wooden cutting board next to the sink. Crack! It was a sharp, violent sound. Leo jumped back, terrified. Eleanor dropped the pestle into the sink with a clatter. Hiding the evidence. She threw her hands up to her face, recoiling as if she had been struck. But the video didn't end there. As the footsteps thundered down the hall, my footsteps, David's footsteps, Eleanor leaned toward the phone on the counter. She whispered 5 words. They were clear. They were distinct. They were the words of a sociopath. Now watch her snap. The video cut out as I burst into the room. I sat in silence. The silence of the grave. Now watch her snap. It was a script. She knew I would yell. She knew I would defend my child. She had counted on my maternal instinct to be the very thing that condemned me. She had weaponized my love for Leo. I replayed the video. Crack. Now watch her snap. I felt a coldness spread through my limbs that was sharper than fear. It was the absolute, crystalline clarity of hatred. I had never hated anyone in my life. I was a person who believed in communication, in empathy, in the benefit of the doubt. But this woman had terrorized my son to frame me. She had planned it with a friend named Helen. She had a financial motive tied to a trust fund. She was not a grandmother. She was a predator. I saved the video. I emailed it to myself. I uploaded it to a secure cloud drive. I sent it to the lawyer, Sarah Jenkins. Then I texted Bethany. I got it. Thank you. You just saved my life. Bethany replied. Burn her down. Lila. She has done this to everyone. But she never messed with the grandkids before. That is a new low. I closed my laptop. I walked into the kitchen. David was still sitting there. He looked up. Hopeful. "Did you get coffee?" he asked. I did. I said. I sat down opposite him. I looked at his face. The face I had loved for 10 years. I saw the fear in his eyes, the deep-seated conditioning that told him his mother was the sun, and we were just orbiting planets that needed to stay in line. "I am not going to take a break." "David," I said softly. He sighed. "Lila, please, we have to do something to appease her. We are not going to appease her." I said, "We are going to expose her." David shook his head. "You cannot fight her. You do not understand. She has the whole town. She has the money. She has a video." I said. David froze. "What?" "She filmed it. David, she set up a camera, and she made a mistake. She recorded the rehearsal." David stared at me. He didn't want to believe it. To believe it meant his entire worldview would collapse. To believe it meant his mother was a monster. "I'm not going to show you yet," I said, "because you are not ready to see it. You will try to find an excuse for her. You will say she was confused. I would not. You would." I cut him off. "You are programmed to protect her." "But I am programmed to protect Leo. So here is what is going to happen." I leaned forward. "I am going to let her play her hand. I am going to let her spread the rumors. I am going to let her think she is winning. I am going to let her host that gratitude gathering next weekend that I saw on her Facebook page." "The gratitude gathering?" David asked, bewildered. "Yes, she is inviting the whole town to give thanks for her health and to talk about the tragedy of her family." I stood up, "And we are going to go, and we are going to bring the truth with us." David looked at me. He looked scared, but for the first time. He looked at me not as a loose cannon, but as someone who had a plan. "Lila," he whispered, "what are you going to do?" "I am going to finish the story she started." I said. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. A gray car was driving slowly past our house. It was a neighbor from Briar Glen. They were watching. Let them watch, I thought. I had the video. I had the timestamps. I had the screenshots. Eleanor Morgan wanted a show. She wanted a dramatic climax to her Thanksgiving thriller. Fine, I would give her one, but she wasn't going to like the ending. The Monday morning sun hit the kitchen table with a cheerful, oblivious brightness that felt like an insult. I sat with a lukewarm mug of coffee and a stack of legal documents David had dug out of the fireproof safe in the basement. He had been reluctant to show me. He had mumbled something about it being boring financial jargon, stuff his father had set up years ago. But I knew better. The comment in the private Facebook group, "There is a trust fund clause for unfit guardianship," had been the key to a door David had kept locked, perhaps even from himself. "This is it?" I asked, tapping a thick sheaf of papers bound in a blue folder. David nodded. He was standing by the sink, scrubbing a pot that was already clean. He was scrubbing it with the intensity of a man trying to erase his own history. "My dad set it up when I was 20, he said. It was supposed to be for education, then for a house down payment, then for, well, just family security." I opened the folder. The header read, "The Morgan Family Preservation Trust." I began to read. I am a copy editor. I read for a living. I know how to spot the passive voice that hides responsibility, and I know how to spot the clause that hides a trap. It took me 20 minutes to find the mechanism. It wasn't a standard trust. It was a discretionary fund, fully controlled by the trustee. The trustee was Eleanor Morgan. I ran my finger down the page, stopping at Section 4, Paragraph B. Disbursements are contingent upon the beneficiary maintaining a lifestyle consistent with the moral and social standing of the Morgan family. The trustee reserves the right to withhold funds in the event of behavioral instability, marital discord that threatens the family reputation, or estrangement from the family unit. I looked up. "David? Yeah? Did you know this was in here? That your mother can cut you off if she decides you have marital discord?" David stopped scrubbing. He turned around, drying his hands on a towel. He looked young and defeated. I knew there were strings. "Lila, There were always strings. That is why we got the down payment for this house only after we agreed to spend Christmas at her place for 3 years in a row. It is how she works. It is a negotiation. It is not a negotiation, I said, my voice flat. It is ransom. I kept reading. And then I found the smoking gun. It was an addendum, signed 5 years ago, right after Leo was born. In the event of a beneficiary's spouse being deemed unfit or unstable by a consensus of the family committee, funds may be redirected to legal counsel for the purpose of protective custody measures. I felt the blood drain from my face. A family committee. That meant Eleanor, Aunt June, and probably the Reverend. They had codified a way to finance a divorce war against me using David's own inheritance. And look at this, I said, pointing to a column of figures on the back page. Management fees. David walked over. What about them? Your mother pays herself a management fee of 15% annually for administering the trust, and there is a consulting fee paid to H. Miller Services. Who is H. Miller? David asked. Helen Miller? I said. The woman on the speakerphone. The woman with the storage space. Her church friend. I sat back, the papers rustling under my hands. It was a grift. It was a beautiful, sophisticated grift. Eleanor wasn't just controlling her son. She was siphoning money from the estate to pay her friends, calling it administration, and holding the threat of poverty over David's head if he ever tried to look too closely at the books. If he left her, he lost the money. If he stayed, she stole the money slowly. David stared at the paper. 15%? That is thousands of dollars a year. She is robbing you, David, and she is using your own money to pay the woman who helped her stage the slap. David sank into the chair opposite me. He put his head in his hands. I signed it. I signed all of it. She told me it was just tax updates. She said, just sign here, Davy. It protects Leo. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. His hand was cold. We are going to fix this, I said. But first, we have to survive the week. I stood up. I had to get Leo ready for school. I had to make oatmeal. I had to pack a lunchbox with a superhero note. I had to pretend that my mother-in-law hadn't just declared a holy war on my marriage. Routine is a shield. I dressed Leo in his favorite blue hoodie. I made sure he brushed his teeth. I walked him to the bus stop, holding his hand until the big yellow vehicle hissed to a halt. Have a good day. Buddy, I called out, waving like the cheerful suburban mom I was supposed to be. He waved back, grinning. He was resilient. He was forgetting. But as the bus pulled away, I saw a car slow down across the street. It was a black SUV. The window rolled down halfway. A woman I recognized from the church choir looked out, her eyes scanning me, then scanning the retreating bus. She didn't wave, she just watched. The paranoia pricked at my skin, hot and sharp. They were watching him. They were looking for signs. Is he dressed okay? Does he look sad? I walked back to the house, my spine stiff. I would not let them turn my son into a specimen. By 10 o'clock, the social escalation began. It wasn't a direct attack. Eleanor was too smart for that. It was a flanking maneuver. I received an email from the PTA president, a woman named Stacy who lived 3 streets over in Briar Glen. Hi, Lila. Just checking in. We heard things have been a bit rocky lately. We wanted to remind you that the Parent Support Circle is meeting on Thursday if you need a safe space to talk. Also, just a gentle reminder that volunteers for the Winter Carnival need to have their background check forms refreshed. Given everything, we thought it might be good to get that updated. Given everything, there it was. The polite exclusion, the subtle suggestion that I was no longer a trusted member of the tribe. I didn't reply. Instead, I got in my car and drove straight to the elementary school. I walked into the front office. I signed in as a visitor. I asked to see the school counselor. Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable was a kind woman with reading glasses on a chain and an office that smelled of peppermint tea. She looked surprised to see me. Mrs. Morgan? Is everything okay with Leo? Leo is fine, I said, taking a seat. I sat with my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. I channeled every ounce of professional poise I had. I was not the hysterical mother. I was the copy editor. I was clarity personified. I am here because I want to get ahead of a narrative that might be making its way to you. I said, Mrs. Gable shifted in her chair. She looked uncomfortable. Actually, she said, hesitating, I did receive a phone call this morning. I didn't blink. From my mother-in-law? Eleanor Morgan? Mrs. Gable nodded. She expressed concern. She said there had been a violent incident over the holidays and that we should keep an extra eye on Leo for signs of trauma. She mentioned you might be under a lot of stress. I nodded slowly. I expected that. Mrs. Gable? I said, here is the situation. There is a family dispute regarding financial matters and control. My mother-in-law is using a fabricated story about Thanksgiving to exert pressure on my husband and me. Leo was not harmed. Leo was not witness to violence. Leo is happy, safe, and loved. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a typed summary of Leo's routine, his mood, and a statement from his pediatrician, whom I had called yesterday for a quick wellness check, just in case. This is for his file. I said, it states that Leo is physically healthy and psychologically stable. I am asking you to please document any interactions you have with my extended family regarding my son, and I am asking you to call me, and only me or my husband, if you have any actual concerns about Leo. Mrs. Gable took the paper. She looked at me. Really looked at me. She saw a woman who was calm, articulate, and fiercely protective. She did not see the unstable woman Eleanor had described. I understand. Mrs. Gable said quietly, thank you for coming in. Lila, it helps to have context. We will keep the school a neutral zone for Leo. I left the office feeling a small victory. I had built a firewall, but when I got home, the enemy had breached the perimeter in a way I hadn't anticipated. There was a manila envelope in the mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name, Lila, scrawled in block letters. I brought it inside. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. It contained 3 sheets of printer paper. They were screenshots. I stared at them, my breath catching in my throat. They were text messages I had sent to my sister, Chloe, 3 years ago. Message from Lila. She is suffocating me. Chloe, I swear. Sometimes I just want to scream at her during dinner. She treats David like a puppet. Message from Lila. If she critiques my parenting one more time, I might actually lose it. I need a glass of wine before we go over there. Message from Lila. I hate that house. It feels like a museum of judgment. They were private vents, frustrations expressed in confidence to my sister. Harmless, normal venting, but printed out on stark white paper, without context. They looked like a manifesto of hatred. They looked like proof of a long-simmering rage that had finally boiled over into the slap. How did they get these? Chloe wouldn't betray me. Never. I looked at the top of the page. The timestamp format was odd. It looked like a restore file from a cloud backup. And then I remembered, 4 years ago, I had upgraded my phone. I had given my old iPhone to David's younger cousin, Mike, the one who had been filming at the table. Because he had broken his, I had wiped it, or I thought I had wiped it. But Helen the IT friend, if Mike had given the phone to Helen, and if I hadn't done a factory reset correctly, or if my cloud password had been compromised, this was a violation. This was surveillance. I walked into the kitchen where David was staring at the trust documents. I threw the envelope on the table. Look, I said. David picked up the pages. He read them. His face paled. These are private, he whispered. Your mother has a hacker. David, I said, or at least someone who knows how to scrape data from old devices. Helen Miller. David looked sick. This is illegal, isn't it? Probably, I said, but proving it is hard, and right now, she is sending me a message. She is saying, I know everything you have ever said about me, and I will use it to paint you as a hateful, unstable daughter-in-law who finally snapped. I paced the kitchen. The anger was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. They were fighting dirty, so I had to fight smart. I needed to prove the leak. I needed to prove. beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Eleanor was disseminating information she shouldn't have. "I have an idea," I said. "What?" David asked, looking at me with fear. "I am going to set a trap. A canary trap." I picked up my phone. "Who talks to your mother the most? Besides Aunt June?" "Cousin Beatrice." David said, "She calls Mom every day at noon." "Perfect." I composed a text to Cousin Beatrice. Beatrice was sweet, a bit dim, and a terrible gossip. I had always been friendly with her. "Hi, Beatrice," I typed. "I hope you are well. I know things are weird right now, but I wanted to ask for prayers. We are taking Leo to a specialist on Wednesday, a neurologist. He has been complaining of dizziness since Thanksgiving. We are worried it might be stress-induced vertigo. Please keep it to yourself. We do not want to worry the family." I showed the text to David. "Dizziness?" David asked. "He is fine." "I know." I said, "That is the point. It is a lie. A specific, unique lie." I hit send. "Now," I said. "We wait." We didn't have to wait long. 3 hours later, David's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID. "It is Mom," he said. "Put it on speaker." I commanded. "Record it." David tapped the screen. His hand was trembling. "Hello? David?" Eleanor's voice filled the kitchen. It was breathless, panicked, high-pitched. "David, why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" "Mom?" "About the dizziness," Eleanor cried. "I just heard, oh, my poor baby. Stress-induced vertigo?" "David, this is serious. This is neurological." David looked at me. His eyes were wide. The trap had snapped shut in record time. "Who told you that?" David asked, sticking to the script I had written for him on a napkin. "It does not matter who told me," Eleanor snapped. "The family talks because we care." "David, you cannot leave him in that environment. If he is getting dizzy, his body is rejecting the stress. You need to bring him to me. I have the guest room set up. I can watch him while you deal with Lila." David's face hardened. For the first time, the fear in his eyes was replaced by something else. Disgust. He saw the machinery. He saw how she took a piece of information, fake information, and immediately weaponized it to demand custody. She didn't ask if Leo was okay. She didn't ask to visit. She demanded he be removed. "He is not dizzy." "Mom," David said. His voice was steady. "What?" Eleanor paused. "But I heard—" "It was a test," David said. "Lila made it up. She told one person, and within 3 hours, you are calling me to take him away." Silence on the other end. A thick, heavy silence. Then, Eleanor's voice changed. The panic vanished. The syrup vanished. It became low and venomous. "You think you are clever, David? You think playing games with your son's health is funny? I think you spying on us is sick," David said. "I saw the trust fund papers. Mom, I saw the clause about the family committee. I know about Helen. Lila is poisoning you." Eleanor spat. "She is twisting your mind." "No," David said. He stood up, taller than I had seen him in years. "You did this. You slapped the counter." "We have the video." "Mom," I gasped silently. He wasn't supposed to play that card yet. The silence on the line stretched for 10 seconds. "What video?" Eleanor whispered. "The video from the kitchen." David said. "The one where you practiced. The one where you said—" "Watch her snap." Eleanor laughed. It was a dry, terrible sound. "You are bluffing. There was no camera." "We will see," David said. "I am hosting a family apology dinner this Friday." Eleanor said abruptly, pivoting as if the accusation hadn't happened. "I expect you both to be there. We need to settle this like a Christian family." "We are not coming," David said. "If you do not come," Eleanor said, her voice turning to steel, "I will have to explain to everyone why you are absent. I will have to explain that Lila is keeping you hostage. I will have to show them the texts she wrote about how much she hates us. Yes, David, I have the texts too. She was threatening public humiliation. She was threatening to release the hacked messages to the entire clan, and she added, If you do not come, I will freeze the trust, effective immediately. You won't get the January disbursement. I hope you can pay the mortgage on a single income." David looked at the phone. He looked at me. "We will come," I said, leaning into the phone. "Lila?" Eleanor said. "We will come." "Eleanor," I said clearly, "but not to your dinner. We will come to the gratitude gathering on Saturday, the big one, with the neighbors and the donors." "No," Eleanor said quickly. "That is a social event. That is not the place for family business. It is the perfect place." I said, "You want to talk about gratitude? We have a lot to be grateful for. We will see you Saturday." I hung up the phone. David stared at me. "Saturday? That is the whole town. That is 50 people. Exactly." I said, "She wants a stage." "David, she staged the slap. She staged the rumors. She staged the text leaks. She loves a performance." I walked over to the table and picked up the envelope of hacked texts. "So we are going to give her the biggest performance of her life. We aren't going to hide in a private dinner where she can spin the story. We are going to the public event, where there are witnesses she cannot control." David sat down heavily. He looked terrified, but he also looked relieved. The secret was out. The war was open. I have been afraid of her my whole life. He whispered, I always thought if I was just good enough, she would stop. She never stops." "David," I said gently, "narcissists don't stop. You have to stop them." I pulled my laptop toward me. "I have work to do," I said. I spent the next 3 days preparing for the gratitude gathering as if I were preparing for a murder trial. I organized the evidence. Exhibit A, the video of the staged slap. Exhibit B, the recipe camera photos showing the angle. Exhibit C, the trust fund documents showing the financial coercion. Exhibit D, the dizziness trap timeline showing the leak. Exhibit E, the timestamp on the hacked texts proving illegal access. I did not make a PowerPoint. That would be too corporate. I made a simple, unlisted playlist on YouTube. I called it Thanksgiving Truth. I bought a small, portable projector. I contacted the lawyer, Sarah Jenkins. I told her to have a cease and desist letter drafted and ready to be served on Monday morning. I kept Leo home from school on Thursday and Friday. We baked cookies. We watched movies. I kept him away from the whispers. I told him we were having a staycation on Friday night, the night before the gathering. David came into the bedroom. I was laying out my clothes, a navy blue dress. Conservative, serious, armor. "Are we really doing this?" he asked. "We have to." I said, "If we don't, she wins. She gets the narrative. She gets the trust. She gets to hold this over Leo's head forever. Remember when your unstable mother ruined Thanksgiving?" David nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It was his grandmother's ring, the one Eleanor had given him to give to me, with the caveat that it stayed in the family. "I want you to wear this," he said. "Why?" I asked. "Because," he said, a grim smile touching his lips, "it will remind her that you are still the wife, and it will remind me that I chose you, not her." I put the ring on. It felt heavy. "Tomorrow." I said, "Tomorrow." David agreed. We went to sleep, or tried to, outside. The wind howled through the suburban trees, but inside, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of a held breath before the plunge. Eleanor Morgan had spent 30 years building a fortress of reputation, cemented with money and guarded by lies. She thought she was safe behind her walls. She didn't know that I was bringing a wrecking ball, and his name was Truth. The Saturday of the gratitude gathering arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise, a slate gray that threatened snow, but delivered only a biting, relentless wind. I stood in front of the hallway mirror in my own home, adjusting the collar of my navy blue dress. It was high-necked, long-sleeved, and unassailable. It was not a dress for a party. It was a dress for a deposition. David stood behind me, tying his tie. His fingers were fumbling with the silk. his reflection pale and ghostly in the glass. He had barely slept. Every time the wind rattled the windows last night, he had flinched, as if expecting his mother to burst through the sash with a court order. "You do not have to say anything," I told his reflection. "You just have to stand next to me." "I know," he said, his voice rough. "But she is going to come for us. Lila. You know she is. She is going to try to separate us in the room. She is going to corner me near the bar. Let her," I said, turning to face him. "Let her think she has you cornered. That is when she gets sloppy." We had dropped Leo off at my sister Chloe's house an hour ago. He was armed with a pepperoni pizza, a stack of movies, and a strict instruction from me. No phones, no FaceTime, just fun. Leaving him behind was the most important tactical decision I had made. Eleanor expected a prop. She expected a traumatized child she could coo over. A visual aid for her narrative of protection, by removing him. I was removing her shield. I was forcing her to face me without a human shield to hide behind. We drove to Briar Glen in silence. The town looked sickeningly perfect. Wreaths hung on every door. Electric candles flickered in every window, promising warmth and tradition. It was a facade. I knew now that behind those heavy oak doors lay secrets, debts, and silences bought with trust funds. The driveway was packed. There were luxury sedans, SUVs with heated seats, and the occasional vintage convertible that signaled old money. We parked near the back, between a Mercedes and a hedge of perfectly trimmed boxwoods. "Ready?" I asked David. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. He touched the pocket of his jacket, where his phone sat. Not recording this time, but ready. "Let's go." The front door was open. The sound of a string quartet drifted out, mixing with the low hum of 50 voices. We stepped into the foyer, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lila. It was Aunt June. She was wearing a red velvet dress that looked like it belonged on a Christmas card from 1950. She rushed toward us, her face arranged in a mask of tragic concern. "We did not think you would come," she whispered, grabbing my hands. Her hands were cold and damp. "How are you holding up, dear?" "I am fine, June," I said, extracting my hands gently but firmly. "Thank you for asking." She looked over my shoulder, scanning the space behind me. "And where is the little one? Where is Leo?" "He is with my sister," I said. "We thought it best to have an adult evening." A flicker of disappointment crossed June's face. "Oh, Eleanor was so hoping to see him. She has a special gift for him, a prayer blanket. I bet she does. I thought, a prop for the photo op. She can send it with us," I said. We moved past her into the main living room. It was crowded. Eleanor had invited the A-list of Briar Glen. I recognized the mayor, the head of the local Rotary Club, 3 members of the school board, and half the church choir. It was a jury of her peers, assembled to pass judgment on the daughter-in-law who had snapped. As we walked through the crowd, the conversations died away like ripples in a pond. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. I saw the whispers transfer from lip to ear. "That's her. She looks so normal. Sociopaths always do." I kept my chin high. I held on to David's arm, not for support, but to signal unity. We walked to the bar. I ordered a sparkling water. David ordered a scotch. "Neat. Don't drink it too fast," I murmured. "I need the burn," he said. Suddenly, the room shifted. The crowd parted. Eleanor Morgan had entered. She was wearing silver, a long, flowing tunic of shimmering gray silk that made her look like a benevolent angel. She moved with a slow, graceful limp that I had never seen before, a new affectation to sell the health scare narrative. She spotted us. Her eyes widened, performing shock, then melted into a beatific, forgiving smile. She glided toward us, arms outstretched. "David! Lila!" She embraced David first, holding him a beat too long, burying her face in his neck. Then she turned to me. She didn't hug me. She reached out and touched my cheek with a hand that felt like ice. "I am so glad you came," she said, her voice loud enough for the circle of onlookers to hear. It is so brave of you to face everyone. I smiled. A tight, copy editor smile. Why wouldn't we come? Eleanor, it is a party for gratitude. Eleanor's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. And Leo? Safe, I said. She sighed. A tragic, hollow sound. Of course, it is probably better. He needs quiet. He needs to process the trauma without triggers. I felt David stiffen beside me. I squeezed his arm. Wait. Eleanor turned to the room, clapping her hands gently. Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment. The room went silent. The string quartet stopped playing. 50 people turned toward the fireplace where Eleanor stood, framed by a massive portrait of her late husband. I just want to say thank you, she began, her voice trembling with emotion. This year has been challenging, as many of you know. My health has been fragile, and we have had some heavy burdens to carry as a family. She paused, looking down at the floor, then looking up bravely. But God is good. He gives us challenges to test our faith, and He gives us community to help us protect the innocent. Murmurs of "Amen" and "Yes, Lord" rippled through the room. I look around this room and I see so much love. Eleanor continued. I see friends who have brought casseroles. I see neighbors who have offered prayers, especially for my grandson. She looked directly at me then, a sorrowful, pitying gaze. We are navigating a difficult season, she said. There are shadows in our family that we are trying to bring into the light. We are trying to protect a child from confusion, from instability, and your support means everything to David and me as we navigate the legal and emotional complexities of this situation. She hadn't said my name, she hadn't said abuse, but she had said instability and legal complexities while looking at the mother. She was publicly diagnosing me and announcing a custody battle in the same breath, all wrapped in the guise of a toast. Someone from the back of the room, I think it was Helen Miller, the accomplice, spoke up. We are with you. Eleanor, we saw the fear in that boy's eyes. We know the truth. The room tightened. The air left the space. It was no longer a party. It was a tribunal. Eleanor looked down. Demure. Thank you. Helen, we just want peace. We just want safety. Then, Cousin Sarah, standing near the buffet, decided to twist the knife. She had obviously been coached. She took a step forward, holding a glass of wine. It is just a shame, Sarah said loudly, that it had to happen on Thanksgiving. To slap a child over a piece of candy, it is just hard to understand. The word hung in the air. Slap. It was the first time it had been spoken aloud in the open. Not whispered. Spoken. Gasps from the guests who hadn't heard the full rumor yet. Oh my God. Someone whispered. She slapped him? I stood frozen. This was the moment. They were branding me. They were waiting for me to scream, to deny it, to look guilty. David stepped forward. His face was red. That is not what happened. He said. His voice was not the booming voice of a patriarch. It was the shaky voice of a son who had been beaten down for 30 years. It wobbled. Eleanor turned on him instantly. She moved close, invading his personal space, placing a hand on his chest. It looked like a mother calming a child. But I saw her fingers dig into his lapel. David, she said softly, but in the silence, her voice carried like a bell. Do not defend the indefensible. You are tired. You are confused. She leaned in, her face inches from his, and then she delivered the line she thought would bury him. Do you want to lose everything? David? The house? The future? Do not make me invoke the clause. She was threatening the trust. She was threatening to bankrupt us in front of the mayor and the church choir. David froze. He looked at me, panic warring with shame in his eyes. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The conditioning was too deep. The fear of financial ruin, of her wrath, paralyzed him. The room watched, judging. They saw a husband silenced by the shame of his wife's actions. They saw a mother trying to save her son from a toxic marriage. It was time. I stepped away from David. I stepped into the center of the rug, creating a triangle between me, David, and Eleanor. I did not raise my voice. I did not look at the crowd. I looked only at her. I lowered my hands to my sides. I unclenched my fists. I made myself an object of absolute stillness. Eleanor, I said. My voice was not loud, but it was projected. It was the voice I used when I had to tell an author their manuscript was broken. Clear, authoritative, final. She turned to me, a smirk playing on her lips. She thought I was going to beg. Yes. Lila? She asked. Do you have something to say? An apology, perhaps? I took a breath. Stop talking about my child as a story, I said. The room went deadly quiet. Eleanor laughed, a short, dismissive sound. I am not telling stories. Lila, I am asking for prayers. I am trying to protect him. You are not protecting him, I said, keeping my tone conversational. You are using him. You are using his name to gain sympathy. You are using his image to solicit donations for a charity that pays your friends. And you are using a false accusation to leverage a trust fund. The mention of the trust fund and the donations caused a ripple of unease in the room. The mayor shifted his weight. The guests glanced at each other. Money was a gauche topic in Briar Glen. Eleanor's smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed into slits. You are hysterical, she said coldly. You are proving everyone right. Look at you. Making a scene. I am not making a scene. I said, I am making a correction. Eleanor took a step toward me. She drew herself up to her full height. She decided to go for the kill. She decided to trap me in the lie she had constructed. Then explain what you did, she challenged. She swept her arm toward the crowd. Tell them, Lila. Tell them why we heard a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Tell them why Leo was terrified. Tell them why you lunged at him. If you are so innocent, explain the noise. She smiled triumphantly. She knew I couldn't explain the noise without sounding crazy. She hit the counter with a platter. It sounded ridiculous. It sounded like a desperate lie. She waited for me to stutter. She waited for me to shout, I didn't do it, which always sounds like guilt. I looked at her. I looked at the crowd. I saw the faces of the people who had judged me for days. I didn't argue. I didn't deny. I reached into my small clutch purse. I didn't pull out a gun. I pulled out a small silver thumb drive. I held it up. It caught the light from the chandelier. Would you like the full video? I asked. Eleanor paused. Her brow furrowed. What? The video, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Not the story you told. The video. The one from the camera you hid behind the mixer. Eleanor's face went slack. The color drained from her cheeks so fast it looked like the blood had been sucked out of her. There was no camera. She stammered, but her voice lacked its usual polish. There was, I said, a smartphone, on a tripod. You set it up at 3 o'clock. You tested the angle. You practiced your reaction in the mirror. I took a step toward the television screen mounted above the fireplace, the massive smart TV she used to display photos of her charity work. I have the footage. Eleanor, I continued, walking slowly toward the technology. I have the footage of you alone in the kitchen. I have the footage of you holding the marble pestle. I have the footage of you slamming it against the cutting board to make the sound. I stopped. I turned to face her. And I have the audio. I said softly. I have the part where you whisper to Helen on the speakerphone. I looked at Helen Miller, who was standing near the back. Helen dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, the red liquid splashing like blood. Helen looked terrified. What did she whisper? Helen? I asked. Helen didn't speak. She was shaking. She whispered. Now watch her snap, I said to the room. The silence was absolute. It was a vacuum. No one breathed. No one moved. The image of the saintly Eleanor Morgan staging a violent incident to frame her daughter-in-law was too big, too grotesque for them to process instantly. Eleanor looked at the thumb drive in my hand. Her eyes darted to the TV, then to David, then to the door. For the first time in 30 years. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered. There was fear in her eyes. Primal. Naked fear. You are lying, she whispered. Her voice was thin, reedy. "You are bluffing." "Am I?" I asked. I held the drive out to David. "David," I said, "do you want to plug it in? Or should I?" David looked at his mother. He looked at the woman who had threatened to destroy him 5 minutes ago. He looked at the crowd. He took the drive from my hand. He didn't look at me. He looked at Eleanor. He walked toward the TV. Eleanor lunged. It wasn't a graceful movement. It was a scramble. She threw herself toward David, grabbing at his arm, her fingernails clawing at his jacket. "No," she shrieked. "You cannot! It is private. It is family business." The room gasped. This was not the reaction of an innocent woman. This was the panic of the guilty. David shook her off. He was stronger than her. He pushed her back, not violently, but with a force that said, "Enough. Sit down." "Mother," he said. He plugged the drive into the side of the TV. Eleanor stood panting, her chest heaving, her silver tunic disheveled. She looked around the room, pleading with her eyes. "Don't watch." She begged the mayor. "Please." She doctored it. "She is good with computers. She is a liar." David picked up the remote. He navigated the menu. The screen turned blue, then displayed a folder list. Folder 1, the rehearsal. Folder 2, the setup. Folder 3, the event. He clicked the rehearsal. The video began to play on the massive 60-inch screen. The resolution was crisp. There was Eleanor, in her kitchen, holding a marble pestle. There was Eleanor, checking her reflection. There was Eleanor, practicing a face of horror, then relaxing, then practicing again. The room watched in horrified fascination. It was like watching a behind-the-scenes clip of a movie. But the movie was their own lives. Then, the audio. "Stay ready. Helen, I will make sure the angle is clear." The mayor turned to look at Helen Miller. Helen was backing away toward the door. Then, the video shifted to the next clip. The event. Leo walked in. The innocent curiosity in his posture. The scream. No, the slam. Crack. The recoil. And then, the whisper. "Now watch her snap." The video ended. The screen went black. For 3 seconds. There was no sound in the room except the wind howling outside. Then, a voice broke the silence. It was Mrs. Higgins, the head of the library board. She slammed a pestle. "Mrs. Higgins said, her voice full of wonder and disgust. She slammed a pestle and blamed the mother. Eleanor was backed against the fireplace mantel. She looked small. She looked old. She looked like a rat trapped in a corner. "It was a demonstration," she cried, her voice cracking. "I was showing what could happen." "Lila," the mayor said. He stepped forward. He was a serious man. A man who had donated $5,000 to the Morgan Family Trust for community outreach. "Lila," he said, "you mentioned fraud." I looked at the mayor. "I did." I said, "I pointed to the TV. If she is willing to stage a domestic assault to manipulate her son, what do you think she is doing with the management fees for the trust?" I asked. "What do you think happens to the donations for the Family Preservation Charity?" I looked at David. "David?" I said. David stepped forward. He looked at his mother with eyes that were completely dead. The love was gone. The fear was gone. There was only the cold ash of realization. "I have the bank statements," David said to the room. "I found them in the safe. 15% management fees. Consulting payments to Helen Miller. For IT services that don't exist." Helen Miller was at the door now, fumbling with the handle. "Don't let her leave," someone shouted. 2 men near the door blocked Helen's path. Eleanor slid down the mantel until she was sitting on the hearth. She put her face in her hands. She began to weep. Not the fake, pretty weeping of the last few days. Ugly, guttural sobbing. "It is mine," she screamed. "It is my money. I built this family. I built this reputation. You are all ungrateful." I stood over her. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, exhausting relief. I looked down at the woman who had tried to take my son. I leaned down. "I have 6 words for you. Eleanor," I whispered. She looked up. her mascara running, her face a ruin. I have video. I said, call the police. I stood up and turned to the room. I'm going to pick up my son. I said, I took David's hand. We walked out. We walked past the shocked faces. We walked past the shattered wine glass. We walked past the ruin of the Morgan dynasty. We walked out into the cold, gray afternoon. The wind hit my face, and for the first time in a week, it didn't feel like a bite. It felt like fresh air. Behind us, inside the house, I heard the rising clamor of voices. I heard the word police. I heard the word embezzlement. But I didn't look back. I got in the car. Drive. I said to David. He started the engine. His hands were steady. Where are we going? He asked. To get Leo. I said, and then, home. Our home. As we pulled away, I saw a police cruiser turn into the driveway, its lights flashing silently against the darkening sky. It was over. The story was finished. But as I looked at David's profile, staring straight ahead, I knew that for us, the aftermath was just beginning. We had survived the explosion. Now, we had to walk through the wreckage. The HDMI cable was a simple, black snake of plastic, coiled on the mahogany console table beneath the massive television screen. It looked innocuous, a piece of technology you would use to show vacation photos or a holiday slideshow. But as I reached for it, I knew I was holding a fuse. The room behind me was buzzing with a frequency that felt like a hive of disturbed wasps, low, angry, and confused. David stood next to me. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that betrayed his terror. He looked at me, and for the first time in our 10 years of marriage, I did not see the boy who needed his mother's permission to be happy. I saw a man who was terrified of what was about to happen, but who was staying anyway. He was watching my hands. They were steady. I marveled at that. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were surgical instruments, precise and cold. I plugged the cable into my phone. The television screen flickered, turning from a dormant black to a bright, unforgiving blue. Lila, Eleanor said. Her voice was a warning shot, low and vibrating with a threat that had worked on her family for 40 years. Do not do this. You are violating the sanctity of this home. I did not look at her. I looked at the screen. I tapped the icon for the video gallery. I am not violating anything. Eleanor, I said, my voice cutting through the humid tension of the room. I am just sharing a recipe. I pressed play. The image on the 60-inch screen was crisp. It was the kitchen, bathed in the afternoon light of the day before Thanksgiving. The angle was low. Peering through the gap between the stand mixer and the stack of cookbooks, it was intimate. It was undeniable. The room behind me went silent. It was a silence so sudden and absolute, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the house into the vacuum of space. On the screen, Eleanor Morgan paced the kitchen floor. She was wearing her pristine apron. She checked her reflection in the microwave door, smoothing her hair, adjusting her expression. She looked like an actress preparing for a cue. She practiced a grimace, a look of shock and horror, and then relaxed her face into neutrality. She practiced it again. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I heard a woman whisper, "What is she doing?" Then, the audio kicked in. It was clear, amplified by the expensive surround sound system Eleanor had installed to impress her guests. "Stay ready." Helen, Eleanor's voice on the recording said, "I will make sure the angle is clear. We need the narrative to stick this time." I saw Helen Miller, standing near the punch bowl, drop her clutch purse. It hit the floor with a dull thud, but she did not bend to pick it up. Her face was the color of ash. On the screen, the scene shifted. Leo walked into the frame. My son. He looked so small against the vastness of the granite island. He looked at the marzipan fruit with the innocent curiosity of an 8-year-old boy. "Go ahead," the recorded Eleanor said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my stomach turn. "You can touch one." Leo reached out, and then the room watched the mechanics of the lie. Eleanor did not look at the child. She looked at the hallway entrance. Gauging the distance of the audience she knew was coming, she raised her right hand. She was holding the heavy marble pestle. She slammed it down onto the wooden cutting board next to the sink. Crack. The sound was explosive. In the quiet living room, it sounded like a gunshot. On the screen, Leo jumped back, his eyes wide with confusion. He did not cry. He just froze. Eleanor dropped the pestle into the sink, hiding the tool. She threw her hands to her face, recoiling in a pantomime of victimhood. Then came the whisper that would dismantle her legacy. She leaned toward the phone, toward the accomplice she knew was recording, and hissed 5 words. Now watch her snap. The video ended. The screen went black. I stood there, facing the television, giving the room 3 seconds to process what they had just seen. I wanted the words, "Now watch her snap," to echo in their minds, to collide with the image of the saintly grandmother they thought they knew. I turned around. The faces looking back at me were a study in devastation. These were people who prided themselves on their judgment, on their ability to discern character. They were the elite of Briar Glen. And they had been played. They had been manipulated like puppets in a shadow play. Aunt June was sitting on the sofa, her hand covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face, not tears of sympathy for Eleanor, but tears of horror. She looked at her sister-in-law as if she were seeing a stranger wearing Eleanor's skin. Eleanor was standing by the fireplace. She was not crying. She was vibrating. Her eyes darted around the room, assessing the damage, looking for an exit strategy, looking for a way to spin the unspinnable. It is out of context, Eleanor cried out. Her voice was high and brittle, cracking under the strain. She gestured wildly at the screen. You do not understand. It was a demonstration. I was showing Helen what might happen if Lila lost control. I was reenacting a fear, not staging a crime. She looked at the Reverend, pleading, Reverend, you understand, don't you? It is a metaphor, a visual metaphor for the spiritual warfare we are fighting. The Reverend looked at his shoes. He took a step back, physically distancing himself from her. Eleanor's face contorted. She turned to the mayor. Bob, she shouted, you know me. You know my heart. She doctored the video. That girl works with computers. She is a copy editor. She changes things for a living. I did not debate. I did not raise my voice to match her hysteria. I simply held up the flash drive. I looked directly at her. I have video. I said, call the police. 6 words. Simple. Devastating. A line drawn in the sand that separated the world of family drama from the world of criminal consequences. Eleanor flinched as if I had struck her. Then, a voice spoke from the back of the room. It was Mr. Sterling, the president of the community bank, and a longtime donor to the Morgan Family Preservation Trust. He was a man of few words, a man who understood the language of money better than the language of emotion. He walked forward, his heavy footsteps echoing on the hardwood. He stopped in front of the television, looking at the black screen, and then he turned to look at Eleanor. That setup, Mr. Sterling said. His voice was deep and rumbling. That tripod. The recording to a remote server. That takes planning. That takes infrastructure. He looked at Helen Miller, who was now backing toward the foyer. And Helen Miller is your consultant, he continued, the one you pay 15% of the trust's income to for administrative services. Mr. Sterling turned back to Eleanor. I donated $10,000 last month. Eleanor, he said, you told me it was for a battered women's shelter. You told me you were building a safe house network. Eleanor swallowed hard. It is for the shelter. Mr. Sterling pointed a shaking finger at the screen. Is the shelter just a hard drive where you store blackmail on your family? He asked. Is the safe house just a line item you use to pay your friends to spy on your son? The question hung in the air, toxic and unavoidable. Where is the money? Eleanor? Mr. Sterling shouted. The room erupted. The embarrassment of being fooled had turned, in an instant, to the fury of being swindled. These people could forgive a little family dysfunction. They could forgive a mother being overprotective. But they could not forgive financial betrayal. They could not forgive being made accessories to fraud. "I want to see the books," someone shouted. "Call the sheriff," shouted another. Eleanor looked at the crowd. She saw her kingdom crumbling. She saw the respect she had hoarded for decades turning to ash. And then she snapped. She lunged. She didn't lunge at me. She didn't lunge at David. She lunged for the remote control that David had placed on the coffee table. She moved with a frantic, animalistic desperation, her silver tunic flying around her. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was trying to turn it off. She was trying to make the screen go blank, as if by deleting the image she could delete the truth. "No!" she shrieked. "Turn it off! Stop looking at it!" She grabbed the remote, her fingers clawing at the buttons. She pressed the power button repeatedly. Mashing it down, the TV screen went black. "See?" she panted, clutching the remote to her chest, her eyes wild. "It is gone. It is over. Now everyone just calm down. We will have some punch. We will talk about this sensibly." She stood there, breathing hard, a 60-year-old woman holding a remote control like a weapon, thinking she had regained control because the light had gone out. But the room was still there. The people were still there. The truth was still there. Someone, I think it was David's cousin Mike, stepped forward and gently took the remote from her hand. "It is not a TV show, Aunt Eleanor," Mike said quietly. "You cannot just turn it off." David stepped into the center of the circle. He looked at his mother. He looked at the woman who had birthed him, who had shaped him, who had terrified him. "Mom," David said. Eleanor looked at him, her eyes wide and wet. "David, tell them I was protecting you. Tell them about the claws. You know you need me. You know you cannot survive without the trust." David shook his head. It was a slow, final movement. "I do not want the trust," he said. "David," Eleanor gasped. "Do not say that. You have a mortgage. You have a child." "I have a wife," David said. His voice was clear. It did not wobble. It did not apologize. "I have a wife who told the truth when you told lies. I have a wife who protected my son when you used him as a prop." He took a step closer to her. "Stop, Mom. Just stop. It is over. The money, the control, the guilt. I am done buying your love. It costs too much." Eleanor stared at him. She looked at his face and realized, perhaps for the first time, that the cord was cut. The thread of poverty, the thread of shame, the thread of exclusion. None of it worked anymore because the truth had burned it all away. She slumped. It wasn't a theatrical faint. It was a physical collapse of posture. She looked small. She looked ordinary. The gathering began to fracture. It was messy. There was no polite exit. "Mr. Sterling was on his phone in the hallway, his voice booming as he spoke to the police. I heard the words, fraud and embezzlement. Helen Miller had vanished, slipping out the side door, presumably to delete servers that were already backed up by my attorney. The guests were leaving in droves. Some of them walked past me with their heads down, ashamed to look me in the eye. They were the ones who had whispered about me in the coffee shop, the ones who had believed the lie because it was easier than questioning the Queen. Others stopped. Aunt June came up to me. She was trembling. "I didn't know. Lila." She wept. "I swear to God, I didn't know she staged it. I thought she was sick." I looked at June. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. "You knew she was mean." "June," I said softly, "you knew she was cruel to me for years. You just didn't think she would go this far. But cruelty always grows if you feed it." June nodded, sobbing, and hurried out the door. Then there were the others, the loyalists, a few of Eleanor's oldest friends, women who had played bridge with her for 40 years, stopped near the door. They looked at me with cold, hard eyes. "You didn't have to do it like this," one of them hissed. "You didn't have to humiliate her in front of the town. You could have handled this privately. You have ruined this family." I looked at the woman. I saw the fear in her eyes. She was afraid because she realized that if Eleanor could fall, Anyone could fall. The truth is not a humiliation. I said. The lie was the humiliation. I just turned on the lights. She scoffed and walked out, her heels clicking angrily on the marble. I realized then that even the truth has a social cost. I would never be welcome in their circle again. I would always be the woman who destroyed the party, the woman who called the police on Thanksgiving, and I was okay with that. The sound of sirens cut through the winter air. Blue and red lights flashed against the bay window, painting the room in a chaotic, strobe light rhythm. Eleanor was sitting on the sofa now, staring at her hands. She didn't look up when the two officers walked in, accompanied by Mr. Sterling. I looked at David. "Let's go," I said. "We didn't stay to watch the arrest. We didn't stay to give a statement. We would do that tomorrow. At the station. With our lawyer." I didn't want to see her in handcuffs. I didn't want that image to be the one I carried of the grandmother of my son. I wanted to remember her as she was on the screen, a performer who forgot the camera was rolling. We walked out of the house. The wind was biting, cold and sharp. It whipped my hair across my face. We walked to the car. David unlocked the doors. We got in. The silence in the car was heavy. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons have stopped firing. The ringing in your ears is still there. The smoke is still clearing. David put the key in the ignition. But he didn't turn it. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He started to cry. It wasn't a loud cry. It was a silent, shaking release. He cried for the mother he wished he had. He cried for the years he had spent trying to please a phantom. He cried for the money he had lost, the community he had lost, and the innocence he had lost. I reached over and put my hand on the back of his neck. I didn't say "I told you so." I didn't say "it's okay." I just held him. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry I didn't see it." "You see it now," I said. He nodded. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He took a deep breath. "Let's go get Leo," he said. He turned the key. The engine roared to life. We drove down the long driveway, past the police cruisers, past the shocked neighbors standing on the lawn. We turned onto the main road, leaving the perfect manicured lie of Briar Glen behind us. I looked out the window at the passing trees, stripped bare by winter. We were broke. We were pariahs in our town. We had a legal battle ahead of us that would likely take years. My son had no grandmother. My husband had no inheritance. We were standing in the wreckage. But as I looked at David, driving with a new, grim determination, and thought about Leo eating pizza at my sister's house, safe and unburdened by secrets, I felt a strange, light sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of gravity returning to normal. The house of cards had fallen. The script had been burned, and for the first time, we were writing our own story. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, and it was hard, and it was going to cost us everything we thought we wanted, but it was ours, and that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was an intense journey into the dark side of family dynamics, gaslighting, and the lengths a mother will go to protect her child. I hope Lila's strength resonated with you. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to draw a hard line in the sand to protect your family, even if it meant causing a scene? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, drama, and the truth coming to light. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in English. Until next time.